Welcome to today's lesson on mixed numbers and decimals. Today I'm going to teach you how to convert a mixed number into a decimal and a decimal into a mixed number. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's begin by reviewing mixed numbers and decimals. Mixed numbers are whole numbers with fractional parts. So here we have one whole and our fraction is 5/10. A decimal is a number that is written with one whole, and then you have a decimal with place values to tell you you're part of a whole. In this case, we have our decimal, and in the tenths place, we have a 5. So this decimal represents 1 and 5/10. Now that sounds familiar. Our fraction represents one whole and 5/10. Our decimal represents one whole and 5/10. Well, that's because mixed numbers and decimals can have the same value. They're just different ways of writing the same amount. So when you're trying to turn a mixed number into a decimal, it's pretty simple. First, you need to write the whole number. So in this case, we have one whole. So when we change this into a decimal, we're also going to write the one whole. Now, after you write the wholes, you're going to put a decimal next to the whole to represent you're now moving into part of a whole. And that's where we're going to change our fraction into a decimal. The denominator of your fraction is going to tell you the place value of your decimal. So since this fraction has a denominator of tenths, we're going to draw a line to the tenths place with decimals. The numerator is going to tell you how many tenths you have. So in this case, we have 5/10. So that means I need to put a 5 in the tenths place. And that's how you exchange a mixed number into a decimal. Let's go over and talk about exchanging a decimal into a mixed number. Just like with a mixed number, you're going to write down your whole numbers first. Where your decimal is, you're going to keep a space because that means you're going to now write your fraction. You're going to look at the place value of your decimal. Since this number is in the tenths place, that is going to be the denominator of my fraction. The numerator of my fraction is the number that's in that place value. So since we have a 5 in the tenths place, I need to write that 5 as my numerator. Let's walk through a few practice problems together. I want you to change 1 and 12/100 from a decimal into a mixed number. All right, let's go through our steps together. We know our first step is to write our whole number. So since we have a 1 in the ones place, I'm going to bring down a 1. Where the decimal is, I'm going to leave a space so that I can now write my fraction. Now I need to find out what the place value is of this decimal. So we have the tenths place and we have the hundredths place. Since this decimal goes all the way to the hundredths place, that's going to be the denominator of my fraction. My numerator is going to be the numbers past the decimal. So the number 12 is going to be my numerator. So 1 and 12/100 as a decimal is written as 1 and 12/100 as a fraction. Let's try another problem together. This time you're going to be taking the mixed number 1 and 6/100 and changing it into a decimal. All right, first we want to make sure that we write our whole number. So we're going to write our whole number, and then since there's a space between our fraction, that's where we're going to put our decimal. Our next step is identifying what place value we need our decimal to go to. Since the denominator of this fraction is in the hundredths, we need to write 2 lines that go to the hundredths place. We have the tenths place and the hundredths place. Our next step is to take the numerator of the fraction and place that into our hundredths place. But we're not done yet because we just have a blank space here. So we need to make sure that we have a 0 as a placeholder. So 1 and 6/100 as a fraction can be written as 1 and 6/100 as a decimal. Let's try one more problem together. I want you to change 1 and 4/10 into a fraction. All right, our first step is to write our whole numbers. We have the number 1. Where there's a decimal, we're going to leave a space to write our fraction. Since our 4 is in the tenths place, we need to write our denominator as tenths. And since we have a 4 in the tenths place, that's going to represent our numerator. So 1 and 4/10 as a decimal can be written as 1 and 4/10 as a fraction. Let's practice a word problem together. Max wants to buy a new soccer ball from the store. The cashier tells him that the ball will cost $8 55/100. Max knows that money is written using decimals. How can he convert this mixed number into a decimal? All right, let's get to it. First, we're going to write 8 and 55/100 so that we can convert this into a decimal. Our next step is to write our whole number first. So we're going to write our whole number, which is 8. And then where we have a space for the fraction, we're going to put our decimal to show that we're now moving into parts of a whole. Since the denominator of this fraction is hundredths, we need to move 2 place values over to the hundredths place. We have our tenths place and our hundredths place. Now we're going to take our numerator and place that into our place values. 55. So now this number is written as a decimal. And if we were to write it into money, we would put our money symbol first and say that that value is $8.55, or 8 wholes and 55/100. Let's take a moment to review what you've learned in today's lesson. A mixed number is a whole number with a fractional part written next to it. A decimal is a whole number with a decimal separating the parts of the whole and the parts filled in to place values. So here we have 1 whole and 6/10 written as a mixed number. Here we have 1 whole and 6/10 written as a decimal. When you're trying to convert a mixed number into a decimal, you need to write out the whole number. When you move to the fractional part, you need to make sure you bring down a decimal. And your denominator is going to tell you the place value that you're going to move to. Your numerator is going to fill in that place value. When you're trying to change a decimal into a fraction, you're going to bring down your whole number. Where there's the decimal point, you're going to leave a space for your fraction. And then you need to find out what place value your number goes to. Since this 6 goes to the tenths place, we're going to put tenths as our denominators. Since there's a 6 in the tenths place, we're going to put a 6 as our numerator.